We are live. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Wisconsin Women's Health Foundation 10th Annual Dialogue. First, I just want to start out and say I am so sorry for anyone that had to deal with parking that wasn't the best. So I really do apologize. That wasn't our plan. So I appreciate you all being here, and sorry if that was not, we're trying to make this not stressful. I am Tommy Thompson, the Executive Director of the Foundation, and thank you all for joining us. And we really are so fortunate that you are here and appreciate you taking the time to be present today. And by doing that, you are actually taking a tangible step towards making your own health a priority. I know sometimes pausing and taking time for ourselves is not something we're comfortable to do and not something we think we should, but it's so important. And it's so important that you are here for not only yourself, but for the people that depend on you. We've had a great team of partners and organizations helping to put together today's event. And I want to thank our sponsors, Unity Point Meritor, UW Health and Unity Health Insurance, UW Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Also, the dialogue is funded in part by MCH Health Title V Services Block Grant, Maternal and Child Health Bureau, Health Resources and Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you all for your support. This year, we are posing a very important question to our panelists. Why can't stressed moms relax? When our team decided on this topic for this year's dialogue, I was intrigued and engaged. Because stress is an issue that we have been hearing across all of our programs and our outreach areas. Because stress is a topic that when we go to the northern counties of the state and when we go to the urban centers, women are talking about it. And not only women, but our nurses and our clinicians and our partners in our programs are talking about stress. Now, I have to be careful not to steal any of our presenters' thunder, but I want to briefly emphasize why we see stress as an unmet women's health need. Because related exposure to stress and trauma is incredibly common. When women have been exposed to high levels of trauma and stress over a period of years, it manifests in increased risk for heart disease, cancer, depression, and many other health conditions. We must stop marginalizing the issue of stress. I say this as a slightly stressed out executive director, mother, as a wife, as a daughter, a sister, a carpool driver, a volunteer, and an engaged community member. And I know many of you are in the same situation. Seeing all of you join us in this room and on the live stream video is very encouraging. We can learn something very important together today. And our hope is that by you taking the time to join in this discussion, it will allow each of us to leave with a better understanding of how stress is impacting you, some tools to address the stressors in your life. Also, we hope the information you hear today will help you understand what other mothers might be facing and be a little empathetic. Without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce a great friend of the Foundation. Our moderator for today is a true Madison celebrity. She has worked as a reporter and broadcaster for 12 years for NBC 15. She is currently the host and executive producer of Moms Every Day. She has graciously featured a few of our staff members on her Mom's Minute segments, most recently highlighting mom stress. She also took time out of her busy schedule to lend her personal insights on mom stress on our new podcast, The Mother Pod. Please check it out. You can find details on your handouts on your table. We are so happy that she has agreed to partner with us in bringing attention to this issue, an issue that she feels very strongly about as well. Please join me in welcoming our moderator for today, Ms. Pam Tauger.
Oh, truth be told, I begged them to let me host this. Because, oh my gosh, once you have kids, I mean, truly, we're all stressed out, right? Everybody's stressed out. But then you have these little infant children that come along, and suddenly, what is it that happens that goes off in your brain, and you think you have to provide this perfect world? Suddenly, the world has to become perfect. And I don't know about you, but I became so stressed out from the minute they arrived, and it hasn't stopped yet. And I have a senior in high school this year God, I hope he's up. Text John, see if he's up. So, and we were supposed to live stream this today, and that's all glitchy, so that's just another bit of stress, and we're all like, Kelly and I are like sweating. We're sweating through our clothes right now. So, welcome everybody. If you had trouble parking, you're probably like us, you're all sweaty, and just take a minute and shake it off, and we're all here, we're all friends, warts and all, it's all good. We are here today to discuss stress, a women's health issue that is so prevalent, yet many times is underaddressed, especially in women. No offense to the men in the room, but dude, we take it on ourselves. It's just difficult. I was thrilled to ask to serve as moderator today because, as many of you know, stress does impact moms and kids, and it for sure fits the description for me. It takes a toll on moms, and it also takes a toll on the children at home, and probably our spouses as well. I'm interested to hear from our panelists today because Lord knows I can use the help too, and how more parents can learn about the impact stress has on the entire family. Oftentimes, parents don't realize that their own stress is affecting their children, and we kind of brush that off too often. Even when we do realize the impact, it can be very hard to make the changes necessary to relieve ourselves from the stress in our household. With us today are 4 panelists who are experts in their field of practice. We're so lucky to have you here today. We'll learn different perspectives from each of them about the impact of stress exposure, how we address stress in our communities, and finally, what we can do personally to tackle our own personal stress. Now, more than ever before, we must bring the issue of stress to the forefront of women's health issues. Next, I'm going to take a minute to go over the format of what we're doing here this morning. Each of our panelists will come here to the podium and speak to you for about 10 minutes. After the panelists have spoken, we'll have an active question and answer session, so make sure you're thinking of questions. That's why we call this the dialogue. You get to speak to us. The audience is actively engaged, and your questions will drive what happens here today, so think about what you want to ask. We encourage you to submit your questions for the speakers all throughout the morning, so even while they're speaking, you can be writing down your questions. All you have to do is find the cards on your table. Everyone's been provided with a pen and cards on the table. Our volunteers will be moving about the room during our speaking time here. We're moms. We're used to things happening. We can multitask. We can pay attention, and people will be gathering cards. So raise your hand. Let's ask questions. Get them up here. If you have a question, raise your hand. They'll come around and pick up the cards while we're going on up here. Your questions will be compiled here at this table, and we'll try. A lot of you will have the same questions, so we'll try to get as many of them answered as we can. They'll compile them, bring them up here, and we'll answer the questions. So you guys get ready. There's going to be a lot of good questions, but we're not trying to stump you, so don't stress out. It's all good. Oh man. So time to introduce our first speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce our expert panelist. Our first speaker is Dr. Raquel Hatter. Dr. Hatter has dedicated over 25 years to serving children and families. Prior to her current appointment as Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Human Services, Raquel served as CEO of Family and Children's Services in Nashville, and before that was the CEO of Whaley Children's Center in Flint, Michigan. As a clinician, her areas of specialty include mental health, trauma, crisis intervention, sexual abuse, attachment issues, and families impacted by abuse, neglect, and poverty. Dr. Hatter currently serves as the president of the American Public Human Services Association Board of Directors. She's an alumni of Ascend with the Aspen Institute that has a special focus on poverty, and she serves as the chair of the Tennessee Two Generation Consortium. She also holds advisory roles at agencies including Alliance for Children and Families and Tennessee Voices for Children. We are so fortunate to have her with us today talking about toxic stress and its impact on families. Please help me welcome Dr. Hatter.
Good morning. It was kind of stressful getting out of that chair, but it's a lovely chair. So thank you for having me here, and I want to send a special thanks to the foundation and to Lisette specifically because I know her and have had the opportunity to work with her, and thanks so much for being here. Really quickly, I am a mom of 2 young adults, and my entire life, my kids are part of the reason that I'm humble, and they have continued to be tools of character building. in my life. They're so completely unimpressed with me. And so that's really cool. It makes the work easier. So really, we have some time that we're trying to stick to so we can get to questions. So I'll try to move swiftly, yet convey what I'm here to share with you based on what I've learned over the many years I've had the honor and privilege to serve kids and families. And at my core, as indicated, I am a practitioner. First, I just want to tell you really briefly a little bit about the department in Tennessee. And so I'm not stressed right now because I'm hitting a button and nothing's moving. Am I pretty? He said, remember he told us not to say nothing? Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right. So, thank you. I appreciate that. You want me to tell you when to move it? Good looking. Okay. See how moms do? So what I wanted to let you know is that the Tennessee Department of Human Services, I'm not going to go over all the programs that we offer, but the ones that people know us most for are programs like temporary census for needy families, and we call that Families First. And then we have SNAP, which is the old school food stamp program, is the prior name for it. And so we serve more than 2 million Tennesseans, with nearly 1 million of them being children. And for the most part, people find their way to us because of the issue of poverty. It certainly is not the only reason that they find their way to us, but for the most part, that's the reason that they come to us. And so today, what I'm going to share with you largely is the implications of poverty and toxic stress and relative to what we've learned from brain science, and particularly its impact on moms. And so that is what I'm going to talk with you about today. And so my next slide, I should say. One of the things that's really important for us to understand about toxic stress in terms of what the research is telling us, and why this is important, because in the absence of this information, what happens is that public policy gets made and gets passed based on skewed and inaccurate information drawn from conclusions about the behavior of individuals. In this case, we're going to talk about moms, but I'm talking about families in general. So what we have learned about the toxic stress, and the issue of toxic stress is not new to us. However, what we're trying to do is talk about how do we mitigate toxic stress for kids and families. And what we know is that when individuals live in chronic poverty in particular, that it forces one to live in what's a survival mode. And so when you're faced with toxic stress on a regular basis, what it does not do is give you the space to tap into what's known as executive functioning skills. And so these are the skills that everyone needs to be successful and to be able to plan, set goals, and organize. And what I submit to you is that many of the moms that we serve are caught up with the same concerns that any other mom has, such as, what are my kids going to eat today? But for some moms, it's no problem to solve the problem. In fact, the only problem you have is, what am I going to cook? What am I going to actually get out of the refrigerator? Or what am I going to go to the store and buy? But for the moms that we have the privilege to serve, it's, I don't even have that to get for my child. So that aspect of it is a toxic stress. And so these are the things that our families face on a regular basis. What happens is, when individuals are operating in this constant state of toxic stress, the survival mode that I mentioned, when you think about it from a behavioral standpoint, it can appear as though they're not engaged or invested in the well-being of their children, because they may not show up to every IEP, every parent-teacher conference, perhaps because if they have a job that's paying something meaningful, it may also be true that if they take the time off, they will lose resources. And so, unfortunately, at points in time, if we don't have this lens of poverty for those families that we know have that stressor, then we forget about that as a real implication and we draw conclusions. And it's not uncommon for legislators who are well-intended, but often, or too often I should say, do not necessarily have the information, which is part of our role, to create policy based on skewed assumptions about the behavior of families. So a few years ago in Tennessee, we had a legislator who shall remain nameless that put forth some legislation that suggested that parents should be penalized financially with their public assistance if their children did not make progress academically. And then, well, yeah, right, no brainer, right? Okay. So it's not working. The webcast's not working, or is it working? Nevertheless, that's a fact. That's what happened in Tennessee. But it's not what we needed to occur for families. It would be one more stressor, and then now stress for kids. So these are the types of decisions that get made if we don't educate policymakers. No matter where we sit, we all have a role in that process. So one of the things that we're doing in Tennessee, across the state, quite frankly, and under the leadership of the governor, is we have an ACEs initiatives that's going on, and many people may be familiar with adverse childhood experiences. And for a department like Human Services, it's not commonplace for this conversation to be taking place. It is starting to become more of a discussion across the country with many human services organizations and through the APHSA that was referenced earlier. What are we doing is that we understand that many of the moms that we serve come to us with experiences of trauma themselves. And what ACEs suggests is that to the extent that you've experienced certain types of trauma or adverse childhood experiences, it places you at risk for some of the things my colleagues are going to talk about. And we just met, and our presentations are so complimentary, so it's really pretty cool. But experiences of abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, and depending on how many of those experiences one may have had, it could place you at a risk for other challenges later in life, which I think I would call some of that social determinants of health. And so what we're trying to do, number one, is to make better assessments of the families that come into our doors for SNAP or TANF or child support or whatever it is they may need within context so that we can see how we can mitigate barriers for moms who may have these other challenges. Moreover, educate moms about the implications of adverse childhood experiences for them and their children, and so that they know what could be going on for them that could have implications for their kids when they're trying to create a better life and create a path toward economic well-being. Our staff in the Human Service Department are being trained on how to utilize this tool. This is not common for human service and public service agencies across the country, particularly the type of organizations, the department that I have the privilege to lead. So next slide. What I'm going to talk to you about really briefly is how we're addressing the issue of poverty, how we're learning to do that in Tennessee, and it's through what's called a 2-gen strategy, and some of you are probably quite familiar with the term, or at least programs like Head Start that's been around a really long time, and I myself am a Head Start alumni. But what this is getting at is the importance of serving the entire family, the parent and the child. Sometimes you have programs that are largely focused on the child, some largely focused on the parent. What the 2-gen approach suggests is that we need to focus on the entire family. The next slide, really quickly, I'm going to share with you some of the components of that. So 2-gen suggests that we should have a focus on 4 things when we're working with families who are trying to find a pathway toward economic well-being. And that would be education, economic supports, health and well-being, and social capital. And in Tennessee, we're working very closely with our families around early childhood education, creating access to quality child care for moms and their kids. And then we also are looking at post-secondary, and you may or may not know that Tennessee is the only state in the country where the governor has created a fund called the Tennessee Promise, where all kids who graduate from high school can go to school to college for the first 2 years at no charge. And Tennessee is the only state, so shout out to Tennessee for that. The other piece that we're doing is some of the traditional things that you've heard of relative to workforce development. But on the health and well-being side, which I'll talk about more, is where we're introducing the ACEs tool and where we're doing work with regard to providing some mental health services as needed. Keeping in mind for us, our focus is on economic well-being to try to mitigate that stress for families. And what we're doing there with the top barriers that we see with the moms that we serve, and the majority of our moms, and the majority of those we serve in TANF are moms. We'll see mental health as an issue, substance abuse, child behavior, domestic violence, and sometimes some learning challenges. And we have support systems that we surround them with to help mitigate that. I'll go to the next slide. Some of the things that we're doing to address this has to do with building our own internal capacity. And I'll tell you just a couple things on this slide. You'll see in the lower corner there at the right, it talks about what's called a strength-based perspective. And simply, this means that we approach families not from a deficit point of view. We make positive assumptions. We believe that people have capacity, and we approach them from that perspective. 2 things I'll mention with regard to what I call the human inclination. One is that people are inclined to learn. Babies they discover. As soon as they're born, when they get to moving, they're just all into trying to figure out what's going on in their reality because we're inclined to learn. The second thing is that she's telling me that my time is up. So, last thing I'll tell you really quickly, I'm gonna get in trouble because this is real stress. I met with a family in Tennessee, face to face, when I was doing tours across the state. It was a mom and a dad. Mom was stating their case that she's in college, dad's working full time, and they needed child care, and they were really, really stressed. And there were some rules that we had created in our state that was gonna make it difficult for this family to be able to qualify. And what I knew for sure is what she said to me is, Commissioner Hatter, whatever I need to do, I'm gonna go to college. If I have to get student loans, whatever it is I need to do, I'm gonna make sure that I go to school and my kids have a good life. She has been in my heart ever since, and I'm happy to say that one of the slides I can't show you. But when I found out that we were had a rule that was interfering with making things happen for families, we changed the rule. I called her myself 2 months ago and said, we have child care for you and your family. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and you handled the stress so marvelously. Just a quick reminder, the cards are on your table. If you have questions throughout, whether it has to do with what the speakers are doing or whatever's just on your mind and on your heart, send those questions up here because we want to answer those as we go through. Our second speaker today is Dr. Jyothi Marbin, a pediatrician at UCSF Binhoff Children's Hospital, Oakland, and at San Francisco General Hospital. She's an associate clinical professor in the Department of Pediatrics at UCSF and the principal investigator on the CEASE, Clinical Effort Against Secondhand Smoke Exposure, California project, and director of the Pediatrics Leadership for the Underserved Residency Program at UCSF. Dr. Marbin is committed to achieving health equity for children. Today, she's leading the charge to train the next generation of leaders who will transform healthcare systems for the underserved. In addition, her work in health equity and tobacco control, with special focus on training pediatricians to help parents quit smoking. Dr. Marbin brings a unique perspective of a pediatrician who looks beyond her child patients to address stressors within the larger family unit, something we all could use. Please help me welcome her to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Is this on? Great. Good morning, everyone. How are you guys doing? Good. I actually wanted to start by, oh, thank you. That's better. I wanted to start by a little bit of stress management. So I wanted us all just to, for a second, take a couple of deep breaths. So we're going to do 3 deep breaths and sit up nice and straight, feet on the floor, body relaxed, and just take 3 nice, big, deep breaths real slow. So in. Thank you. And that's a technique that I do both with my patients, with the kids that I see, and with my residents in my training program as well. It takes just a few seconds, but helps to bring it down and remind us of where we are and being present. So thanks for doing that with me. I want to thank you all for having me here today. It's a huge honor to be able to talk with you all about this topic that I think is really important. I want to thank Dr. Hatter for that incredible kickoff to talking about this topic. Stress is absolutely something that all of us see, speaking as a pediatrician, something that I see every single day. I see the downstream effects of toxic stress and of stress in my patients and in their families. And it's something that I really feel passionately that pediatricians, we ought to be able to help families in some way deal with this stress. When I think about my patients in clinic, I don't just think about the child sitting in front of me, but the entire family really, that entire family unit and that environment that the child is growing up in, I see all of them as really essential in terms of creating a safe and growth-oriented environment for the children. So as a pediatrician, I think that we need to think of pediatricians and the medical community as resources to really helping all of our families deal better with stress. I also, I'm a pediatrician, but my first job is that I also am a mom. I have a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 19-year-old foster son, and I'm learning they're very different issues across the different age spectrums there. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what I'm going to talk about is the program that I run called CEASE, the Clinical Effort Against Secondhand Smoke Exposure. Next slide, please. And I'll talk about, just very briefly, the impact of secondhand smoke on children, and then we'll talk about this intervention. Next slide, please. And we're really thinking about CEASE as one specific example of a program that pediatricians and people who work with children can implement to help families who are feeling stressed and smoking specifically with this example. So very briefly, secondhand smoke, it's no mystery to anyone. All of us know that secondhand smoke has a major impact on children's health. Can you go back one slide? Sorry. Thanks. The most compelling thing, I think, and the thing that I always talk with families about, is there is definitely an increased risk of sudden infant death syndrome for infants living in homes of parents who smoke. And that is a piece of information that many families don't know, but I think is one that's really important to get across. The other thing on this slide that I wanted to highlight is that there's increasing evidence that learning challenges and attention deficit disorder are also higher in children who are living with smokers. And so as a pediatrician and as a mom, you know, I can treat an ear infection, I can treat pneumonia, we have medicine for asthma, but if you tell me that the capacity of a child to learn is going to be affected by the fact that someone is smoking in their home, that's not something that I have a medicine to treat. And so that's just another compelling piece of evidence, I think, that says that we as physicians need to really care about the whole child and the environment the child is growing up in, and offer support to families who want to quit smoking. Next slide, please. Globally, we know that secondhand smoke causes over 600,000 deaths each year. Here in the United States, 40,000 people die every single year from secondhand smoke exposure. 400 of those are infants who die from sudden infant death syndrome, and that's here in the United States. Next slide, please. In terms of who is exposed to secondhand smoke, this is mostly a disease of poverty. We know that children who live at the federal poverty level, 60% of children living at the federal poverty level are exposed to secondhand smoke. And we know that African American children are more likely to be exposed to secondhand smoke than other children are. And then obviously renters more likely to be exposed than owners because of less control over smoking rules in the house. Next slide, please. So why do people smoke? I think that you might be surprised to learn that 70% of smokers actually want to quit smoking. It's not like people don't know that smoking is bad for them, right? This is not new information. People smoke for two reasons. One is that it's an extremely powerful physical addiction. Smoking nicotine is as addictive as heroin and cocaine. Next slide. There's also this incredibly powerful behavioral addiction. And Katie and I were just talking earlier about you can't just talk about quitting smoking in isolation. You have to talk about how smoking is connected to larger issues, including mental health. And part of that is helping to understand and deal with those mental health issues. And my example, next slide, is that we have a mom in our clinic who has 9 children. And that mom said, you know what, I smoke, and we've been trying to help her to quit smoking for many years. And she said, next slide, she said, when I go out and smoke, I go out into the back porch, and it's like, that's my trip to Hawaii. I can't afford to go to Hawaii. I can't take my kids to Hawaii, but that is my trip to Hawaii. Next slide, please. And for her, it's that 5-10 minutes that she gets by herself on the back porch while she's smoking a cigarette. We have to figure out ways to help people manage their stress, understanding that smoking is one way that people do feel like does help to manage their stress. This mom, unfortunately, had a massive stroke. She is still having speech and language difficulty. She's very physically incapacitated, and you can imagine that has a huge impact not only on her life, but on her children's lives as well. Next slide, please. I think one of the common misconceptions about smoking is that people who smoke, one of the common misconceptions about smoking, let me rephrase that, is that people who smoke are going to be more stressed after they quit smoking. And we know from research, both by the Pew Charitable Trust that you see up here, and also by a meta-analysis that was done in 2014 and published in the British Medical Journal, that show that actually, when people quit smoking, they have significant reductions in anxiety, depression, and stress. So if we can just help them get there, they actually will hopefully be better off in the long run. Next slide, please. So the program we run is called CEASE. It's the Clinical Effort Against Secondhand Smoke Exposure. Next slide. And basically, we use those pediatric interactions as a teachable moment for smoking cessation. And I actually think pediatricians are uniquely poised and the best people to talk about smoking cessation for a couple of reasons. One is that we have a relationship with a family. Think about your own, if you're a parent, think about your own children's pediatricians. That's someone that you see over the years. It's someone that you trust and someone who you know is looking out for the health of your child. We pediatricians, we see children up to 10 times in their first 2 years of life. So if I talk with a mom about quitting smoking when her baby's a newborn, even if she's like, you know what, I'm too stressed, I can't do that right now, that's fine. Let's talk about it at the 2-month visit, or the 4-month visit, or the 6-month visit, or the 9-month visit, right? I have so many opportunities to revisit that. Access, that fits right along with there. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but many adults just don't go to see, we don't go to see our own doctors that often because you go if you're pregnant, you go if there's an emergency, but otherwise we don't generally go for our well checks. But I have the opportunity to see that parent every time they bring their child in. And so I believe that every contact point with the medical system should be a time where they can access help and access medical care. And then the third piece is motivation. All of you who are parents, all of you who work with parents know that parents will do just about anything for their children. And I've talked to, I can't even count how many parents who, they say, well, I know that my risk of cancer is higher if I continue smoking, but I really want to quit because I see how it's affecting my 5-year-old and their asthma, and that's why I want to quit smoking. And I think we can all understand that desire to give our children a better life and a better shot than we've had. I'll tell you one quick story in the 2 minutes that I have left, which is I had a patient who was a 7-year-old who I'm treating for ADHD, and so he comes in every month and I give him his ADHD medication refill, and his mom's a smoker, and so every time she comes in, I'm like, hey, you want to talk about quitting smoking? No, I'm too stressed. Christmas is coming up. I'm stressed about that. I just got a new job. So we've had this conversation months and months and months every month. And then one day I walked into the room and she said, Dr. Marvin, I think I'm ready to quit smoking. Can I have that medicine that you've been talking about? And so I was like, great. So I wrote a prescription for the nicotine replacement patches, and I connected her to our California Smokers Quit line. And I was like, I'm really excited you're trying this. And she was motivated. And I was like, all right, good luck. And so a month goes by, and Demetrius comes in again for his visit, and I barely step foot in the room, and she jumps out of her chair, and she goes, Dr. Marvin, I quit smoking. She was so excited. She did it for her son because she saw the impact on his ADHD and on his asthma, and she said, Dr. Marvin, I quit smoking. And now my grandma and my boyfriend are out in the lobby, and they need some of that medicine too to help them quit smoking. Which is great. She's so, building that community of non-smokers around her. And what we're trying to do is just give pediatricians the knowledge and the options to offer this kind of assistance to families. Next slide. So basically, CEASE has 3 easy steps. We teach pediatricians first to screen for secondhand smoke exposure, second, to offer nicotine replacement therapy and write a prescription, and third, to connect people to behavioral counseling to help round out that picture. Next slide. So we teach pediatricians to ask in every office visit, just like we do vital signs, we check blood pressure, temperature, pulse. We also say, does Johnny live with anyone who smokes cigarettes? Next slide. And then we teach the pediatricians to use brief motivational interviewing and to offer nicotine replacement therapy prescriptions. And that's because Medicaid will cover nicotine replacement therapy. It can be a huge financial barrier to a family that's already suffering to then say, go spend $100 or $200 on nicotine replacement therapy. So that prescription just takes away that financial barrier. And the next slide. And then we connect, this is the Wisconsin Tobacco Quit line. In California, we use the California Smokers Hotline. There are these wonderful resources already in place to help offer some of that behavioral counseling that's so important. Next slide. So in summary, yay, I made my 10 minutes. So in summary, I'd love for you to remember that secondhand smoke does have a major burden on children, especially low-income children, that quitting requires an integrated approach, both behavioral and pharmacological services, and that pediatricians, we really should hold our pediatricians to a higher standard because I think that we have to be active in helping families deal with stress from a more holistic point of view. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And remember your cards. If you need to raise your hand to come around and pick up a card, we can do that. They're moving around the room right now. Oh, there's a baby back there. Oh, baby. All right. Our third panelist is Kate. I'm going to come back there and get a hold of that baby in just a little bit. Our third panelist is Katie Gillespie. Katie's a maternal perinatal nurse consultant at the Wisconsin Division of Public Health. In this role, she leads several of the state's maternal and child health initiatives and is a strong advocate for initiatives that make a difference for Wisconsin women. Katie has been heavily involved in Wisconsin's life course theory work, raising awareness about social determinants of health and educating the importance of preconception care. Katie has served as a preceptor for the Wisconsin Population Health Service Fellowship, and she is a frequent presenter author on a range of maternal and child health topics, including perinatal depression, perinatal care coordination, and high-risk pregnancy. We are fortunate to have Katie with us today to talk about the importance of supporting moms' mental health and the intersection of stress, depression, and anxiety. Welcome, Katie.
Okay, pressure's on to get through my slides in 10 minutes. We'll see if I can do it. Okay, so first I want to thank you all for being here this morning on this fine Monday morning, and I want to thank the Foundation for all the work they do to advance the health of women in Wisconsin. And we know that when we advance the health of women, we also advance the health of their families and their overall well-being. So I'm going to talk to you about maternal mental health. So perinatal depression is considered one of the most common complications of pregnancy in the world. It occurs in about 13% of women in the United States and up to 15% worldwide. Next slide. So why is it significant? Well, let's consider an Institute of Medicine report in 2009. Reported that 30 to 50% of all adults will develop recurrent chronic depression. This report also highlighted that 15 million children live with parents who have major or severe depression. That's a lot of children. Another report that was jointly published by the American Psychiatric Association and the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists noted that untreated depression in women is associated with poor health and development in their children. These reports encourage clinicians to view this as a two-generation issue. If we don't treat women to the point of recovery, we leave a wide open door for chronic depression and its negative impact on the next generation. But we can mitigate these consequences through a system of detection, evaluation, and services that support women and their families. Next slide, please. So women in Wisconsin. So we have this survey in Wisconsin called the Pregnancy Risk Assessment Monitoring System. Many of you maybe have already heard of this. We hope so. It's called PRAMS. PRAMS is a mixed mode surveillance system that samples live birth records and collects self-reported information on mothers' perceptions and experiences that take place before, during, and shortly after pregnancy. So here we can see that mothers reported their rate of depression aligns with the national rate, but we can also see that certain groups of women are more severely impacted than others. Next slide, please. We've learned that we can't really view the mental health of women in isolation. We have to view it as a co-occurring phenomenon with anxiety and stress. Evidence suggests that anxiety has an impact on preterm birth, where depression has a greater impact on low birth weight. Chronic stress doesn't have a direct impact on the outcome of the child, but it complicates both of the other two. Next slide, please. So all women are at risk for experiencing postpartum depression, but we know that some key conditions, when present, increase her risk. So here's a list of life stressors that can be associated with postpartum depression. Any one of these risk factors can contribute to the triggering of an episode, and when combined, it can diminish a woman's ability to avoid it. So in other words, it diminishes her resilience to depression. So we can think of this sort of as a pileup of stressors that become the tipping point. So it's not to say that women will develop any or a combination, or who have any or a combination of these risk factors will automatically become depressed. But what we can say is that when we enhance her support during the postpartum period, we can boost her resilience to avoiding depressive episodes when she has many of these risk factors. Next slide, please. So let's go back to that PRAM survey. And we can see that 29% of women reported experiencing 3 or more stressors that we know contribute to postpartum depression. Next slide, please. So to fully understand the impact of pregnancy and birth, we need to consider the emotional work that it entails. So women are transitioning through emotional preparation for motherhood that can be disrupted by external stressors, anxiety, and depressive symptoms. In our culture, we place an emphasis, a huge emphasis, on preparing for baby in terms of purchasing items instead of on preparing to be a parent. We continue to assume that becoming a parent is something that is innately known by all women. What we don't discuss is how a woman moves through pregnancy thinking about herself as a mother while simultaneously revisiting her own childhood. So examining what she would keep, what she would do the same, what she would do differently. Over the course of pregnancy and into the postpartum period, a woman gradually integrates her new role as mother with her imagined to real baby who may or may not match. So, and in my case, that was not a match. But so we know this as the maternal role attainment. So Reva Rubin, who's a nurse, developed this theory of maternal attainment, which describes the emotional and interpersonal transition that a woman experiences in preparation for motherhood. She viewed the mother-baby pair as a self-contained ecosystem with capacity to self-correct if given a proper nurturing environment. So there's 4 central tasks: seeking passage, which is centered around having a safe birth, so that's all about safety. And we can see a woman go through this when she expresses increased worries about her health or how her health impacts her baby and her pregnancy. Then there's acceptance of child. This task centers around there being a place for the baby in the world. So we can see this interrupted when the pregnancy is unplanned, for example. Then there's binding in. This is about forming an attachment to the baby. We see this when a woman talks about her vision of the baby and assigns traits to this baby. Then there's giving of oneself. Here's where a woman learns what she has within to give to her baby and develops the ability to give it. This giving is extremely one-sided for a very long time. I have adult children and I'm still giving. I feel much more than I receive. It becomes highly important that the mother receive nurturing to sustain this level of physical, emotional, social, and mental giving. It's important to note that the first 2 tasks pave the way for the second 2. When a mother doesn't feel safe, when she doesn't feel that she or her baby are accepted, she will find it very difficult to accomplish the other 2 tasks and to bind in and give of herself to her baby. Next slide, please. So what do we tell moms? How do we contribute to her ability to pass through this transition? Our view that women can do it all is proving to be somewhat dangerous. Expectations of mothers are surrounding women constantly, perpetuating this myth of the perfect mother. So think of the pressure we place on women with expectations that you have to breastfeed, you have to keep that baby safe, you have to work outside your home, you have to keep your home functioning. It's a lot that we put upon ourselves and other women. Next slide, please. So what are some of the myths that we really believe? Do we believe these things? Or do we just not argue them and accept them and go on? Next slide, please. How did we get there? So think about policy. So we moved from a 2-week stay. Does anybody remember that? When you had a baby, you stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. It was a very long time ago. We moved from a 2-week to a 2-day stay. During that time, we bombard women with information on how to care for their baby, but we don't give them any time to practice or to learn about their new baby in the safety of the hospital setting with guidance or support. Then we don't pay women to stay home with their babies, leaving many women to return to work while still learning about their newborn. And then we make it even harder by not supporting the cost of childcare, which adds to their stress, as we've already learned. Next slide, please. So here's a map of the countries that have paid maternal leave in the world. So you can see where we stand out. Now think back to that maternal experience. Does this message tell women that they're accepted and that their babies are accepted and that we are giving them a safe place in the world? Because remember, if we don't help women achieve that, they're not going to achieve the other two tasks very successfully. So what can we do? Well, we can screen. In Wisconsin, women tell us that not all women are routinely screened for depression. Next slide, please. Yet the guidance is clear. We should be screening every woman. In fact, the United States Preventive Service Task Force suggests that screening alone can lead to decreased depressive episodes. Just screening. That's simple. Next slide, please. Routine screening can decrease the stigma of depression. If we screen all women, it becomes normal. We become better. Us clinicians, we become better at talking about it and normalizing it as part of health overall. When we screen, we're far more likely to spot symptoms earlier. We can intervene more successfully with even non-medicinal measures. Mothers' experiences change rapidly, so we can't simply rely on that one postpartum visit. We need to screen across the spectrum. We need to screen at every opportunity. So I want to end, I think I'm going to make it. I want to end with the sleep factor, because this is really important to highlight by itself. Of all the risks, sleep is a pretty critical component. It's crucial to consider that this has a strong impact on the body's ability to manage mental health and stress. So when women can get sleep, their resilience goes up. When women don't get sleep, which most of them don't, their resilience goes down. So, what can you do? Because you can't store it. But I wish I could have when I had my twins. But we can help women and their families to understand that long periods of sleep deprivation leads to more depressive episodes. And what it does is it moves women along the continuum of depression. So you have minor depressive episodes, then you can move on to major depressive episodes, and then even to psychosis. The longer women go without that sleep, the greater their risk of moving across that continuum is. So everything I've shared with you up to this point, this one issue can make or break everything else that we've tried. So studies have shown that we need a minimum of 5 hours and 24 hours of uninterrupted sleep to ward off these depressive episodes. Most postpartum women are reporting that they're constantly getting interrupted, and that's where the problem is. So one thing that I would encourage all of us to take away is how can we help somebody we know get a minimum of 5 hours of sleep? What can we do? How can we help her find 5 uninterrupted hours of sleep to support her well-being? So thank you. I'll leave you with that.
Oh my gosh, where were you when I had my babies? I remember telling people at work, and I worked with all these young people, they didn't have any kids. Oh yeah, put your cards in the air. Yep, there you go. I remember telling people at work, I would pay anyone right now, I'll pay you $10,000 if you will give me 5 hours of sleep. And everyone's like, to stay with your baby? No way. So I needed you, Katie. Oh, that's so, supporting other moms is so, so, so important, because so many times we have that myth of perfection and weakness, and we're not perfect and we're not doing it right, and asking for help is a weakness instead of a gift. Why do we have that in our brains? Anyway, we need to get that out of our brains. Our final panelist, Patty Hendrickson, you're going to help us do that, aren't you? She's the one that's going to help us do it. She joins us from La Crosse. Patty is a full-time professional speaker, and her focus is on leadership development for the entire person. Patty works with people who want more out of life. That means less guilt, more focus, and getting more done. I want all of those, Patty. Patty's the author of the inspirational book, now in its 5th printing, called Who I Am Depends on Me. Patty has done presentations in nearly every state, Canada, and Central America, and she's worked with diverse audiences full of moms coping with all sorts of stressors, just like most of us. We're excited to hear from her today about her strategies to find calm and balance amidst the many stressors that we and our neighbors have these days, and we welcome Patty to the stage.
Thank you, Pam. So when I got the call that they wanted me to be part of this program with all of these esteemed individuals who work full-time in the health field, I thought, me? Then I looked at my 13-year-old and my 6-year-old and remembered all those hours. I can talk about handling stress. Let me give you a little inside story. I had my first child at 38. He's now 13, awesome kid. And then we always wanted a bunch of kids, but we weren't lucky, you know, a lot of miscarriages and just always wanted more, but gave up. Then all of a sudden, at 45, I got this interesting message. And I said, oh my. Amelia's now 6 and I am 51 and I am usually the oldest person at the PTA meetings. That's my success story. I got the call and I thought, oh, sure. Well, what do you want me to do, Lizette? And she said, why don't you give kind of a concrete plan and steps so people can implement? I'm like, okay. Sat down, did a brain dump, 48 things on my list. And then I looked at the email again and she said, 10 minutes. That's not happening. So I picked of those 48 the biggies. The things when I look back, when I was in the midst of the mayhem, the stress, when you literally want to just sit down and cry. Raise your hand if you've been there. Be honest. Look around the room. Yes. It's not fair. I hate those people who are driving by happy, right? You all had those moments. I am not the only one. So I have condensed it to a few items I'm going to share with you. This is not brain science. Intellectually, you know all these things already. It's in the midst of the blur of activity that is our lives, we don't process that this I should do. Sorry. See, I need to process. He was there, a good photo op. All righty. So, wherever you are on this continuum, and I want to give special attention to everybody because we're all in this together and we're all at different stages. Whether you're in the room and you want to be a mom, but it's not happening. You're ready. This is for you. Whether you're wearing the new title of mom and all the mayhem that comes with that. Sleep. Yeah, hello. Or if you're joining us on the live stream because you are so busy and you can't be here, it's for you too. Or if you've been lucky enough that your child has learned what the toilet is. Yeah. Yes, that's a monumental moment. Or maybe you've gone out to dinner for the first time and you only have to cut your own food. Big win. Or maybe you've crossed that threshold where your child is engaged and attended to from 8 to 2 every weekday. Yes. Oh, there's something glorious that happens that fall. Tears and then, wow, yes. Or maybe you're helping your child through puberty. Or maybe that child whom you adored and you invested so much time and energy with is ready to leave, and you're sad. They're going to go goodbye. You hope for this many, many times over the years. How many more years? It's happening, and you're sad. Or maybe you're in the audience and you had kids who left, and now they came back. When are you going to leave? This is for all of us, because we're all in this together. So I'm not going to spend huge amounts of time, but I think these are things we need to remember, because in this room you are with kindred spirits who want to be great members of this human race. Not just a great mom, not just a great coworker, not just a good partner, but you want to be the person you know you could be. And that's the ultimate bar. I often say to my son before he goes to bed, Are you proud of the person on your pillow? And it makes me reflect on my day, and it engages us in a conversation about our expectations for tomorrow. Because no matter what I did today, maybe you wore crabby pants with that kid of yours that you yelled at. You know if you do that, like, bummer. You regret that. But that happened. Get over it. Tomorrow, what can we do to make it better? Okay? So on the screen, there's a giant number, 2.8 million. Huge number, right? This is not a medical fact. This is not a statistic. This is just something that we should know when we're feeling overwhelmed by all the things we need to do. Every single second of every single day, 2.8 million emails are sent. And the amount that comes into your inbox is growing every single year by 15%. So 10 years ago when it was 100, if you fast forward that today, that same amount that you got is now 405 emails. So we've got human beings who need us. We've got all these other people who are invading our space, but it's important. I've got to give attention to this. We're all spread thin, right? If you remember nothing else I say, remember this. There is no way to be a perfect mom, but there are a million ways to be a good one. And it's about the person in your chair. You got to own what you have. And I want to share some tips to make that happen. The slide says, don't cheat the world out of your wonderful. Everybody in this room has something, their essence. It's before everybody demanded so much of your time and you stepped up to the plate and just kept giving and giving. That sparkle, that magic. Whenever you showed up, your friend would laugh at you. Or your sister adores you, loves you. Or your partner likes it when you come home because you're home. Yeah. What is that thing you bring? We've got to find that. Because when we're overstressed and exhausted without that sleep, that's what we have to tap into. So my first strategy for you, the first tip is to find that wonderful is every single day we need to schedule one thing, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a whole half an hour that we do for ourselves, nobody else. And you say, oh, I can't. Yes, you can. If you don't do it for you, who will? We have got to own. Raquel talked about execution skills. This is it. We've got to step up to the plate. What's one thing? Is that sitting down and playing words with friends for 10 minutes? Yay! Is that watching that little soap opera you like to record and watch later? Whatever it is, that little thing that makes you happy, or maybe it is going and sitting outside and putting your feet up on the deck and looking up. Oh. For 10 minutes, you do it for you. Nobody else. Nobody else is taking care of this thing called you. We've got to do it. We've got to do it. Don't cheat the world out of your wonderful. No signal cannot be displayed. I'll tell you what the next picture is. Oh, there we go. Second thing, we need to show up. That is a picture, a graphic. I was looking and saw this, and I thought, we got to be vulnerable enough to just show up. To be there, to be present, all of us. Whether your hair has not been brushed for 6 days or you got like a half a minute shower, yeah, success, right? This morning, stress, parking, trying to get here, right? All these pieces, but you're here now. Please raise your hand if you have ever been in one of those days where you've done so much, maybe 70 things happened on your calendar, but you don't really recall being at any one of them. Raise your hand. Look, you thought you were crazy. You're not. You're a woman. Pardon me, and there's a few men in the room. You are somebody who is stressed by the process of life. I want to give you a quick little tip. I need you to sit up really tall in your chair. This sounds so silly, but this is a reminder of you taking charge of being in control. The next time you are in a meeting or having a conversation with somebody and you feel your mind just in that fog, feel your butt. You're like, what? Not with your hands, that would be gross. But I'm not kidding. To ground ourselves or to come back to that presence, that clarity of where we are, You know, so often we're functioning in the clutter and the chaos, and we need to get to that place of competence and confidence, because you know you're good in that space. That's where your wonderful is. You need to just feel your butt, and I'm not kidding. I want you to practice sitting very nice and tall. Suck it in right here, because, oh, you look good. Yeah. I want you to squeeze your butt cheeks. No, I'm not kidding, just really hard. Come on. If you're smiling, you're doing it. Smile at your neighbor, because they're doing it too. When you are in a meeting and you do this, nobody else knows it, but you do, and you're like, yeah, I'm here. And you are engaging yourself at a level that is fun and funky, and nobody else owns it but you. But you're taking charge, all right? So later on during the dialogue, when I see you guys going, I know what you're doing. We got to show up, we got to feel our butt, we got to be present, all right? Next slide. Celebrate small wins. That is literally a picture of my daughter's floor. And that's the little hangers she used to have and the big hangers we replaced to put her clothes. I was crazy busy one day, like most of you are. And I don't know about you, but I'm so eager to get on to the next thing, to get another thing done, to get out the door. I had a plane to catch later on that night, and I was not packed. And I need to have my packing done, because I was gone for several days. But we finished this project, and when she looked at the floor, she said, oh, Mama, look. I'm a big girl. It's big. And in that moment, I literally wanted to crumble to the floor and weep, because she was sharing a life-changing moment for her. She was so proud. And how dare I ever rob her of that moment? No matter what the list of to-dos was, that was the most important thing. And as a growing woman, which she is, even though she's only 6, I need to instill in her that we should celebrate our small wins. Did you sleep 6 hours last night? Rock star, you're above the average, yay! It's a small win. What have you done today, or what will you do that puts you in a better place? If we don't celebrate those, nobody else will. And it's the whole piece of leadership and motivation is all about momentum. You gotta kick it somewhere. Start small and it builds big. Nobody else needs to know what you're doing. It's all about your presence. Celebrate our small wins. This slide, please read along with me out loud. No, this is a complete sentence. Am I going to share any other information about this? Next slide. No. Next slide. If you didn't get that, talk to your neighbor later. On your table are little cards. It's called the Green People Project. I don't have a huge amount of time to chat about the whole project, but it's something self-directed. I had 2 things that were enormous failures in my business. I own it, cost a lot of money. The wrong people were in charge of something, and it failed miserably. Happiness, not at all. But from that, I realized what happened was I had the wrong people in charge of something. And from that moment on, I realized these folks were not people who were inspiring to me, who were motivating, who were helping me build and grow and fortifying who I was. You know, when you're like, think of somebody who stands like, somebody, when you're with him, you just feel like you could do anything. Who is that person? That person, that face that just popped in your mind, that is one of your green people. The Green People Project helps you take an inventory of all the people that come in your life, and then look through them and literally categorize them. Red folks, stay away from. They suck you down. They suck the life out of you. Ick, yuck. We do not need that. Yellow, could be good, could be bad. Look out. Green, ha ha ha, bring them on. And once you identify those green people, you post their names near your workstation, by your telephone. If any one of those green people call to share time with you, you make time. If any of those red people call, you run away. And this sounds so silly and so, oh, come on, this is elementary. Yes, it is. This is the stuff that positions you to be better. When you surround yourself with people who are like-minded, who support you and encourage you to be better, you become better. Don't put yourself next to somebody who sucks the life out of you. You're all you've got. Own it. Be it. Green People Project. And they're at your table. Grab them. You could do it on your telephone, too, but I like the obnoxious card, because if it's in your pocket, it's annoying, so you do it. All right? Of all of these little tidbits I've shared this morning. This is the best encapsulation when I talk about personal leadership, which is what being a great mom is, to be the best leader for yourself that you can be. It says, attract what you expect, reflect what you desire, become what you respect, mirror what you admire. We're all on this parental journey together, but each one of us has to make it our own. And when you look about the things that you naturally admire, that's what you want to aspire to do, to be. Personally, I have 2 goals for my children. I want to raise stable, self-sufficient human beings. That's clarity of purpose. Anything, any question, if it's not those 2 things, it's not in my life. Sorry. Yes, you will clean up those dishes for the 3rd time. And one day we'll get it right. But if I don't keep doing those things I know to be true, I won't be successful. This last little picture up here is the best family picture we have ever taken. And I share that with you because at face value, that's a great picture. That's little Amelia, myself, my hubby, handsome Brad, and my son Max. The picture looks great. However, if you knew the story to make that happen, it was one of those days when your head almost blew off, okay? So no matter what we see of somebody else's situation, we can't judge ourselves by somebody else. We know the reality. And when we're doing well for ourselves, that's what matters. So I'd like you just to look around your table. Come on, look at them, whether you know them or not. And just tell everybody at your table, thanks for being here today because we're doing great. And you all laughed after you said that. So we're ready to have a dialogue with you. Those are a couple of quick tips. I'm glad you're here because the fact that you show up here means that you care about this topic and you want to do better. Thanks.
Oh, man. What great reminders. Remember when I had babies, I considered it a good day if I got out of my robe and I brushed my teeth. Those were my victories. And a lot of days I never brushed my teeth. So that's why we didn't have babies for a few years in between. My husband was like, dude, brush your teeth. So now is the question and answer time. So yay, Patty, thanks all of you so much for bringing your brilliant minds and your great attitude. Love it. I love the small victories. It's so true. We forget. We look around and compare ourselves to the perfect pictures on Facebook so often and think it's unattainable, but we must get there anyway. So why is that? We are at the end, and it is time to ask questions. So we're at the end of our presentations, and now we're going to ask some great questions. Our panelists are making themselves comfortable. Are you comfortable? Do you guys
Yes.
need anything? Water? Awesome. Your questions are being tabulated over here. Some of you are asking similar questions, so we're trying to get that all going. And as I get us rolling here, first of all, one of the questions that I can answer a question. This is my small victory. Cha-ching. Will the PowerPoints be available? Yes, they will. The website, wwhf.org, WisconsinWomen'sHealthFoundation.org, wwhf.org for our friends in the streaming world. Do that later, though. Don't do that now. So all of the information will be available on there afterwards when we're all done. And I do have questions here to get us started. I think each of you can probably weigh in on this. How can you tell the difference between feeling stressed out and when your stress requires asking for help, professional help? What do you guys, how can we figure that out? How can we know? Besides being on I've been on the floor in a puddle of tears too, and I'm not sure that I knew that I needed to get help. What do you guys think? Weigh in. Who wants to go first? Go ahead.
I think, for me, I think it's when it interferes with your ability to function, either in relationships or in your work or at home. I think there is, we were talking about toxic stress, there also is positive stress, right? Like, it was a little stressful speaking in front of all of you, but it was a good thing to do. Yeah. So there's positive stress, then there's the stress that really kind of weighs you down and brings you down. And I think if it gets to the point where you feel like, gosh, I'm unable to have a healthy relationship, I'm unable to get out of bed, to get breakfast for everyone or whatever it is, I think that's the point that hopefully others around us can help, because sometimes I think when you're in that moment of stress, it's hard to have the insight to feel like, gosh, I should get some help. But for me, I think it's when it interferes with function.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? No? You all completely agree? What do you think, Patty?
We all need to know ourselves, and everybody is unique. There are some people, the continuum of energies. I happen to be pretty high energy, if you didn't notice. I live with a man who is so far here, there's no further to go. For my normal is very different, and I think everybody needs to really sit and understand in this process who you are, what's good for you. And when you start to feel that you're slipping, or, man, I'm just sad, that's the first to reach out to other people nearby, your green people. And then if it's still not helping, then the next step is, it's okay, I need somebody.
Good. Katie?
Well, I think that you're going to notice it in physical symptoms as well. You may find that you're having repeated headaches, that you're not able to sleep, that you're not interested in eating. But one of the questions that we ask all moms is if they're able to feel joy. And if you can't feel any joy in your day, then it's time to reach out.
Oh, that's great advice. Raquel?
Only thing I would add is I think you can also pay attention to the people around you. My daughter, I don't know if it's something with my hair that happens when I'm stressed, but she says, "You didn't have a good day, huh?" So I'm trying to brush it before I say it. But nevertheless, those people that matter a lot to us, if you pay attention to how they respond, is because oftentimes moms are a gauge or the barometer for the family. Right. And so which is pretty cool too, right? You can change some things, because when you're not okay, you start singing Aretha Franklin, like R-E-S-P-E-C-T. So that's what my mom used to do.
Yeah, I love that. So I think another question too, to follow up on that, is not all of us are at the same point in our journeys. Some of us are, grandmothers. Some of us don't have our own children. Some of us want to support friends who we see are struggling. What can we do as other moms and friends and family members, mothers, sisters, to help those we see and we suspect who are valiantly trying to hide it? How can we help them?
I think one thing we have to do is help people to put it in perspective. We were talking, I don't know if any of you guys have seen that commercial where there's the mom and she's really particular and she has the antibacterial wipes everywhere she goes, and then the second baby she has the mechanic to hold the baby. and nothing's really, nothing tragic is gonna happen. And so it's the idea, because we all wanna be the best that we can be as moms. And so to put that in perspective, I think becomes really important. I think one of the best ways to do that is to share our own story in terms of where we thought that we blew it, or and the reality of it is that you're not going to get it right every time, and give people permission to get it wrong from time to time. And it's not even necessarily wrong. It's just life. And I think to validate folks' reality and suspend judgment wherever possible.
I think I'm also thinking about what would have helped me. I think really taking the time to listen. I think we move so fast, and it's like, hey, how you doing? Good, okay, good, I'm good too, okay, great, I'll see you later. But actually making the time for to have coffee with someone, or go for a walk, and even, I try to now combine kind of a healthy, get outside and take some deep breaths and go with someone for a walk to check in with them. I think just taking that time, and it's so, it sounds a little trite, I think, but it's something I need to keep reminding myself of as well, because my energy is go, 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 okay, next thing, check it off the list. But to really take a second and check in with someone, and to make the time to have lunch or to have a cup of coffee, I think that's one thing. The other thing I would offer, again, speaking from personal experience, is babysitting. Just watch it, taking someone else's kid for an hour, for an evening. It's a very concrete way, I think, that we as a community can all help each other out.
Katie's advice was, I travel a lot, not a good community member because I'm gone, I have a schedule. That was great advice, though, you gave about what can we do to support somebody else to help them sleep. And I've got 2 people that I need to reach out to, so thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I remember my older sister when she had her first child, and she said that the best thing was going into the pediatrician's office when she would take the baby out of her arms, hold the baby, and then she would look at my sister and say, look at this child, you are doing such a terrific job. And that's how they started the visit every time. So I think letting her know that she's cared about, I mean, she is constantly caring and doing for somebody else, and in the beginning, it's a long time of that somebody else not giving her any feedback that's rewarding. So that's a hard thing to keep pushing yourself to do time and time and time again, day in, day out, 24 hours. I think just letting her know you care.
Really good. And she's doing a good job. Good is good enough. You don't have to be perfect, right?
Right.
Here's a question from the audience. I swear I didn't write this, but it could have been me. I seem to yell a lot, and then I instantly regret it. Mom guilt. How can I stop, and how do I repair the wounds I create from exploding at my husband and kids?
I'm struggling with this right now.
Me too.
But I have a neighbor who, she is a rock star. She's working in NICU, okay? Patients off the chart. And whenever I'm almost to that moment, I'm like, oh, Amy wouldn't do that. What would Amy do? And she is my role model. And she never raised her voice. And it is, I have this champion in my life that I can look to for the image. And it's working. My daughter says I'm wearing crabby pants less often.
I struggle with this also. And you feel terrible because you never mean to yell, and then you do, and then you hear yourself, and you're like, oh, did I just really say that? So I do not think I have any answers other than I try to be forgiving of myself. Like, you yelled, it's okay, you're a human being, something triggered you. It doesn't help to perseverate and then beat yourself up over it. So just sort of, I did that, I don't want to do that again, and then forgive yourself. And then I think for me, every family is different. I think for me, a lot of it is in the setup. So I'm so guilty of trying to do stuff on my phone when the kids are asking me questions, and then I'm like, stop talking to me for a minute. And so I try to remember to put down my phone before I'm with my kids. And I try to make sure that the time that I have with them is time that I'm not on my phone unless it's an emergency. So I think if I make sure that they're not hungry or tired, like if I sort of look out and do a little bit of pre-planning with them, it feels like it sets up the environment a little bit to be more successful.
I train myself to whisper when I. So if I'm whispering, they know I have a problem.
Shh, Mom's mad.
Yes, it's
Love it.
Lots of restraint.
Katie?
I use the bathroom fan a lot. It drowns out everything. And, and it works.
You go in the bathroom and turn on the fan
Yes.
and just go at it.
Just wait.
Yeah, just wait.
But I think I agree with forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
And then apologize. Show your humanness.
Yeah.
Then they're going to learn.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I have an soon to be 18-year-old. I don't want to rush it, but I asked him, so I carry around this guilt too, and I asked him recently, do you remember that time when you were 2 and you were in your room and I yelled at you because the Legos were all on the floor? And he's like, what? So I think it's okay. I'm going to move on from that one. Next question. These are great questions, you guys. You can keep them coming, too. Stigma question. Are women usually able to be honest with providers when questions come up about sensitive issues like depression or smoking, abuse, other things like that? Are we able? Is it a difficult thing for women to, how do you get around that? You see it every day, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's such an important question, and I think to me it speaks to both the relationship with the provider, and it also speaks honestly to the way that our health system is set up, because if so often, you have 15 minutes to spend with a patient, and then you're running behind because the last patient was late, and then the patient before that was late, and so all of a sudden you have like 10 minutes, and so I think I know that I certainly am guilty of this, and I've observed others doing things like asking questions in a way that gets the answer that you want. So you're not depressed, are you? You're not feeling sad, are you? You're not a smoker, are you? Right? And so asking the question, that's a terrible way to ask a question, because what's the person going to say? Oh no, I don't smoke. How would I, I can see the judgment in your voice. Why would I say yes to that? So I think absolutely they're very sensitive issues. They're very hard to disclose even in a really productive conversation. And the way that specifically for healthcare providers, the way that our system is set up and works, I think it really actually dissuades many of those conversations. I think, though, that having a strong relationship with the patient where they know that you are available, maybe if it's not in that 15 minutes where they feel like they can disclose something, but then they can call you or they can get in touch with you or they could set up another time to come talk to you. I think that certainly would help. The other thing we're doing more and more is behavioral health integration. So we have mental health providers who are actually in the clinic. So if I'm talking with a mom who's a smoker who really wants to quit and is depressed and struggling with that, I can say, you know what, we have someone here who can talk with you. And I can actually get that person down into clinic almost immediately and talk with the parent. It's the same thing with a teenager who's depressed or suicidal or anxious. And so I think we can do better at building systems that help to promote some of these sensitive conversations. But absolutely, it's a really, really hard thing to bring up, and you need to have the time. It's not like you can get a yes, I'm depressed answer and be like, okay, great, now let's talk about how your breastfeeding's going. You have to really engage and spend time talking about that. And I think looking at ways that we can adjust our healthcare system to be able to provide some more of the structure that allows that to happen is a big, big to-do for us.
And I think that's really important to emphasize, that it has to be something that we integrate into all of our conversations with women and families. And during a pregnancy, we see women very frequently, and that even escalates as the pregnancy goes on. And then she has that baby, and boom, she is no longer the focus of attention, and everything is about that baby. But this is a very sensitive time for her, a very vulnerable time for her. So I think the more we ask about it and normalize that your mental health is part of your overall health. So how are you doing today isn't just asking what your pain level is. It's asking, how are you really doing? How are you having joyful moments? Are you able to laugh? How are you feeling everywhere? Mm-hmm. So we really the more we integrate it, the more likely we are going to be to get accurate responses from women. And I think that the stigma is there because we continue to hide it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we aren't always going to have a quick intervention, and that is difficult for all providers, that we can't do something right away. There's no immediate prescription. But what if you started, jotting down the things that you could do? I'm going to prescribe that you take a walk today. I'm going to prescribe that you laugh. Make yourself laugh, and see what we get then.
I think what I would add to that is the suspend judgment. It's really, like, we might say that we aren't judgmental, and then there's like 75% of communication is not what we say. And being able to create an atmosphere where people know that they're not going to be judged, and whereby we're authentic and that we accept them for who they are, it's not that easy, and people can pick up on things. And so you really have to decide if that really is a core value for you. No matter where you sit, no matter what the education, no matter what the title, at the end of the day, the charge is to convey dignity and respect. And you know what's interesting to me about this? It's not unlike, I'll say, in my case, church. Like, you go to church, and it should be the place where you get the least judgment. But unfortunately, it's the place where we don't want anybody to know anything, right? Because we might get judged, right? And so what I submit to you is that I think we have to revisit what our core values are relative to validating other folks' reality, no matter where we sit. And people respond to authenticity in an environment that's free from judgment. And they're compelled then to know that they can share, and then it's been humble enough to share our own missteps. And I think that lets people know that they matter and that you want to connect with them in a way that you both grow in that process.
So true. A quick note, one of the questions was about a specific thing, float therapy, and other ways we can mitigate stress. Obviously, there's lots of things we can do to do that. There are exhibits we want to make sure you've seen out in the hallway about ways you can mitigate stress, learning about journaling, yoga, that type of thing. So when we're done here, make sure you visit those areas, and then we won't be able to answer every question, and that's how we'll try to address some of those more specific ones is with our exhibits out in the hallway. Dr. Hatter, there's a question here that someone is demanding that you tell your success story that you didn't get a chance to tell because you got the rat. Do you remember your second success story? Because we're dying to hear it.
Okay. The one I told was actually my favorite one.
Oh, well, tell your second favorite.
Okay, the second, but I'm gonna come back to the first one.
Awesome.
All right, but the second one was a mom who, she was a single mom. She had heart surgery, and she was receiving assistance, and then she had to have another surgery later. She today is a registered nurse.
Oh, that a girl.
And we had the opportunity to recognize her for what we call the Resilient Families Rise Above Award. And she is absolutely phenomenal, and she has a beautiful little boy. And I was just really humbled by her story. And I don't think she's an exception. I think there are also moms out there who have that same capacity given the right resources and support.
Absolutely.
And my other story, because
Bring
the
it.
microphone's on. So
We want to hear it, baby.
well, the other thing, and it's not a story maybe as much as a point. No matter where we sit, whether it's in a public, private, whether we're a donor, I think we have to remember, like, we talk about the system of support that we're always so mad about and so frustrated about, as though we can do nothing about it. And it's not true. I was in a meeting not long ago, and we were talking about the need to change some different laws and rules. And somebody said to me, Raquel, that's ridiculous. We're not going to get all the states to come together and agree. I said, so when is the last time in America a great thing happened and everybody agreed on it? So you don't need everybody to do a great thing. You just need the number of people that it takes to do the great thing. So from wherever you sit, harness the courage of whatever it takes to influence whatever rule, whatever public policy it is, because there's so many kids and families across the country that need us to do this. We're either going to be a part of the problem or part of the solution. What I submit to you is there's no middle.
Thank you. Katie, we have a specific question for you also. You mentioned the tipping point for women in depression. What should we do if we suspect someone we love might be at that tipping point?
Stay with her. Don't leave her. Check in with her constantly.
So
And
hard though,
get her
because so
help.
many times they push back.
Just be there.
Okay.
Be there for her. And if you can't be there, find somebody else to take your place. Just sit with her. Because if she's not going to accept help now, she will eventually, or maybe you're just being there, is going to turn it back around and put her back on the right trajectory.
Wear her down. I'm not leaving, Mama. What do you guys agree?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Very good. Let's talk about the perfect mom. How do you recommend we deal with the expectations that we need to be a perfect mom? I hate them, and yet they're in my head all the time.
They're imaginary.
Yeah, why? Because I'm never the perfect mom. I can't be, I'm just not the perfect mom, and yet I can't let go of that. And this isn't even my question, you guys. Someone else out there's with me. What can we do? Give us suggestions. What do you think? We'd probably sit in front of you at the clinic all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to ask ourselves why we think those things make us a perfect mom. I remember when I had my kids, I had it in my head that they were never going to have a store-bought cookie. that I was going to bake their cookies all of the time, and that cookies were really important. I don't know why. To this day, I don't know why. And it was excruciatingly heartbreaking when my kids came home from a play date and said, Mom, we had these wonderful cookies. You know what? You can buy them in the store. They're called Oreos. They're so delicious. And I thought, they didn't even notice. They don't even care. And then I realized that it was me. that they really didn't care.
I think this is a female thing, not just mom, it's just everywhere. You know, perfect is there, get over it. And if we just own that and we do it, you just got to step up. I'm good enough at what I do. I mean, you're a testament to what you believe. And if you live that belief, other people see it. It becomes the norm around you.
I think partially for me, it's also about reframing and looking not at what I'm not giving, but what I am giving to my kids. So obviously I'm a working mom. My son, when he was in kindergarten, this is so sad, he said, "Mommy, how come all the other moms come and pick their kids up right after school and you pick me up at the after school program at 6 o'clock? And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry. But then we started talking about working moms. And I was like, you know what, I'm really lucky because I have this great job and I love my job. And when I'm at my job, I help kids. And I think my kids really respect that. And my son wanted me to go on a field trip with him, which I do occasionally do. Don't get me wrong. And my daughter was like, John, she's got to go help the kids at the clinic. And just like she was really proud that that's what her mom does. And so for me, I try to just to help them and myself see what I am able to do a little differently. And then I think I love what you said about good is great. You know, you don't have to be perfect, but you can do lots and lots of good things, which is what I do think I do.
Right. So I have a similar stories. Mine was a bit more humbling. So my daughter, they were talking about what she's about, I don't know, maybe 8 or something like that. She's 23 now. And so we were talking about careers, and they were talking about what they want to be when they grow up, when they choose in school. And so she's telling me all these different things, teacher, doctor, nurse, all these things. And I said, you ever thought about being like a stay-at-home mom? And she's like, well, what do they do? I said, they do a lot. You know, they take care of the family, make sure everybody's needs are met, and they, you know, all this kind of thing. She's like, we need one of those. And I completely wanted to cry as I was getting ready to drop her off at school and go to work. And so, but oh my goodness. And so nevertheless, that dream never came true for her. But, and I think she's okay. But I will say this, is that one of the ways that I found balance is my amazing husband. So there are really no gender roles at our house. And everybody does whatever it takes to make it happen. And so that was, that just has never, I don't know if I'm traumatized by it or not, but it stayed with me.
It's important. It's important if you can let go of those. Just a quick aside to offset your comment. My children came home once from a play date at a friend's house and said, did you know you could take this white stuff on the counter and put it with this other white stuff and chocolate chips and it turns into cookies? Oh! I'm like, oh, we should make homemade cookies one of these days. But, yeah. Let's talk about going to bed and going to sleep when you go to bed. Yeah. How do you turn off your mind? You guys have any tips for sleep? I mean, we know we need 5 hours of sleep, but I don't know about you, but when I'm exhausted until I get in bed, and then I lay in bed and it's like, bing, and my brain is going 5,000 places.
And that's what a lot of women say when they, you know, they're interrupted frequently during the night with a new baby, and then the problem is they can't fall back to sleep. So I think the breathing that we did when we started can really help, and everybody can learn some breathing techniques to try to get your body to relax. And not everybody can afford to do yoga. I mean, well, you can in your own home, but not everybody can go to classes. Not everybody can do all of the other physical activities, but everybody can learn some breathing techniques, and that can be taught anywhere at any time. So that's one way.
And research shows over and over above, those of us who look for things to be grateful for literally are energized, move mentally to another state. So you don't have to find things to be grateful, just the act of, I need to think about things, search for things. And when we end our day at that place of gratitude, of finding those small wins, mentally you are putting yourself in a better place. You're able to get to that sleep instead of stuck in a place where the wheels keep turning. Studies show it's the place that you move to another happier place.
I love that idea. That's great. I think I agree. The breathing, I love that idea of thinking about what you're grateful for. I think for me, I tell people to make sure basic things like don't look at your phone in bed and don't watch TV, because I think the tendency is like, oh, I got all this stuff on my mind, let me just pull my phone out and distract myself so I can fall asleep, but that actually activates your brain, right? So you're not able to then fall asleep. And then I think if there are things that you're worried about, I know that at 3 a.m. I'm always like, oh my gosh, what if I didn't close the door and there's a person downstairs, right? Like your mind just goes crazy at 3 in the morning, all these ridiculous things that would never happen. But getting up and just writing them down sometimes to get them out of your head, and then be like, now I can deal with those tomorrow, and now I can go to sleep. That's, I think, what helps. Sleep is hard though, man.
It is. Yeah, this is not my strong suit. I would do this. I do the same thing. I wake up in the middle of the night. I figure I need to write something down, or God needs to talk to me, or something at 3. And so, but one thing I will say, because I have a lot of energy like you, right? And so, like, by definition, I'm anemic. And I tell my doctor, if we fix it, nobody will like me. And so, but the sleep thing, I try to get naps on the weekend. But the 5 hours, I've learned so much from you guys today. You have no idea. I really enjoyed being here, and I'm going to take some stuff up to the next level, definitely.
Oh, so true. I so agree. Thank you guys, all of you. Great ideas. Let's talk a little more about toxic stress. You know, how do we know if we have it? How can we, build up resilience to that? And kind of as a side note, avoiding those red people, right? I mean, it's the toxic stress, and they're feeding into our toxic stress. So, how do we know we have that, and what can we do to get rid of it?
I think one way to know if it's chronic, right?
Okay.
And the pressure is never gone. Like you're always feeling like nothing's happening, you're not getting anything done. And that creates a problem for us as well. And then there's a lot of physiology, which I know you guys know really well, the cortisol and all that stuff, in terms of the implications that it has, because it really is dangerous. So I think that if it's constant, and you're always in that state, that becomes an issue for you. And I don't think it's too hard to know, because you're feeling like you don't finish one thing and you're on to another thing, and then maybe you forgot that thing, and then all the implications that you start to feel and experience from it become apparent. And I think with our kids are great barometers to know if perhaps we're not managing ourselves effectively, because they feel it immediately, and you can see it so quickly with kids when you're stressed out. They see it really quickly. So I think there's some ways to recognize it.
I'm walking out of this room today with a mission that when I go home tonight, I'm going to talk about this event at my dinner table.
Right.
Because I think sometimes we don't say this is the ugly truth, that there is toxic stress in the world. My children need to hear this. My husband needs to hear this. So it becomes something that is there, not something to shy away from or be nervous about. It is. And people in our lives struggle with it. And if we don't acknowledge it, we'll never have a safe place to talk about it. This is a beautiful event.
Or knowing that I might have it right now. I might. I'm pretty stressed. I mean, besides just feeling like the world is pushing down on you, any other symptoms that people would have? Katie? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when we talk about toxic stress, so we mentioned a little bit about sort of there's positive stress, and that's like when your kid's about to take a test and they're nervous about it, and then they take it and they're like, yeah, I did that, right? Like that's good stress. Then there's bearable stress, and bearable stress is like your partner is sick and in the hospital, and that's really stressful, and you can get through it by leaning on people around you and by getting support, and it's bearable. Toxic stress is a term that specifically we think about, as Raquel said, that's a chronic, it's in medical terms, I guess I define it as a chronic activation of your stress system. So if you think about, like, if you're out in the woods and you see a bear, and what happens, your stress hormones pick up, your epinephrine, like your adrenaline, boom, everything goes really high. And what's happening to children, and we know about this more with children, but what's happening to children who are living in environments where they're living in poverty, living in neglect, witnessing domestic violence, their cortisol, their stress hormones are always high. So it's not like normally when they go up and then you relax, and then they go up and then you relax, but these kids it's up and it stays up. So then what happens? You get almost like a PTSD type response when the teacher is yelling in class about something instead of a child who knows how to deal, who is able to deal with stress. You have children who are chronically stressed out, and that teacher yelling triggers them because that's what happens at home before dad hits mom, right? Like, so that's kind of the toxicity of the stress, that it causes this chronic activation of your stress hormones. You have elevated cortisol levels. That can actually lead to higher rates of obesity, higher rates of asthma, diabetes. So we see then downstream the impact, the physical impact of the chronic activation of your stress. And we know what mitigates that is resilience. So is having an adult, the number one thing is having a strong, caring adult in your life. Going to church, being part of a group. So seeking other forms of social support can really help to mitigate against this toxic stress that kids are experiencing, that parents are experiencing. And I think the same with the bearable stress, the same kinds of things, having social support, seeking out support, offering support to someone who you know seems like they're stressed, because having that kind of community around you is really one of the key things that we know helps.
If I could add one thing to that, I think we don't underestimate individuals' capacity to understand some of the concepts. So and how we think about things is really important. So we talk about the amygdala and how it's just this little small almond that can take control of us. So if nothing else, eat an almond and you may have some control. But you think about the amygdala, right? And then our frontal lobe, our cerebral cortex. So we call it it's a short distance but a long journey. And so the idea that because we all have indicators, physiological indicators of when we're feeling stressed. Like if you pay attention to it, so we have to study ourselves and know when we're starting to feel stressed. And then we need to intervene from a cognitive standpoint to really assess what is the trigger that's causing us to feel this way, and then what are we going to apply to mitigate it. So I think that we really can have those kind of practical conversations with ourselves, with people that we care about, and the people that we have the privilege to serve, to really understand when something is going on. If you really, all of us know. Like sometimes I feel like I feel my vena cava. Now I know I have a problem then, right? Because you really shouldn't feel that. But I know that I'm stressed out right now. My heartbeat starts to go up. And if you train people how to be in tune to that, then you give them the opportunity to intervene.
Good. I think this kind of goes along with that. This is an interesting question. If my child, this is for Dr. Marbin, if my child's pediatrician views my child as their sole patient, how can I move the conversation towards me being involved also? And then as a side note, can you prescribe to an adult who is not your patient?
Yeah, great question.
Okay.
So the second question, yes. We actually prescribe to parents all the time if there's a lice outbreak in the family, if there's scabies, if someone in the family has pertussis. We prescribe to the entire family all the time. It's a public health. We're able to do that through just sort of the principles of public health. And so smoking, I would argue, is also a huge public health crisis. So absolutely, pediatricians can prescribe to parents of our patients. In terms of helping, that's a hard question, I think, the reframing the pediatrician's view to include the whole family. Because I've definitely talked to some pediatricians who say, like, you know what, I get why the parent smoking is impacting the child, but really it's not my job. And it's hard for me to say, really, it is your job, right? I think it's sort of a way in which we approach our work. But I think that it's absolutely appropriate and helpful. I mean, if you as a parent has a concern about how something that's going on is affecting the health of your child, I think it's absolutely appropriate to bring it up with a pediatrician, even just to say, what do you think about this? Do you have other ideas for resources? And they may or may not, but I think to open that conversation, I think really anyone involved in the care of a child has to recognize that it's the environment of the child that also has an impact on that child's health. So I would hope that they would be open to having that conversation. And if they are totally shutting you down and you feel like this is not the right relationship, then feel free to find a pediatrician who will listen to you, because I think that's, as I told one of my patients on Friday that I had in clinic, I said, you know your child best. You're the expert in your child. I can provide you medical advice, but you are the one who knows your child the best. And so I'm depending on you. This is a partnership. And if you feel like the pediatrician isn't holding up their end of the partnership, then I think it is time to find someone who will.
That's great.
You guys agree? It's okay to break up with your pediatrician, right?
It is. It is.
I mean, dude, we're the consumers.
yeah.
I mean, really.
Absolutely.
And it's we've done segments about this. It's some of us sometimes we feel like we have to be loyal even past the point of getting good service.
Right. No,
We don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
There's alternatives,
Yeah.
friends. Have you heard of adrenal exhaustion? What is it? What can be done? Am I even saying it right? Adrenal?
It would be adrenal exhaustion.
I'm afraid of it. Do I have it? What is it? I hope I don't have it.
Well, your adrenal glands are where your activation hormones come from. I haven't heard of exhaustion. I'm assuming the term means that you're just sort of overproducing your stress hormones, but I don't actually know that much about it. I don't know.
No.
All right.
Not that-
Sorry.
Anybody else wants to jump in? All right, fine, we'll Google it. How
might
about
be an
this
adult
one?
thing. I know
Okay, I'll
kids.
throw this one out there. A lack of organization can be a source of chronic stress. What do you suggest about that, Patty, or any of you?
Bite size, bite size. Everybody has those little 15, 20 minutes that you can find. If you are living in clutter, like those stacks, oh, I'll get to that. You know what I mean? 15 to 20 minutes, just move through a little bit. If you did that once a week, you're gonna manage it, and you're having ownership, or I'm taking care of this, not that, oh my goodness, this pile is growing. I don't know what's in there. Oh no, those lessons started 6 months ago. Oh crap, she'll never learn to play soccer. Oh no. Right? You've been there. But it's those bite-sized pieces, it's the momentum we start. And it's not, need to have a weekend. No, you don't. You need 10 minutes to say, I'm gonna throw away 20 things in here. Go to it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great. I'll add also that in my house, and this may not be the answer for everyone, but in my house we've automated a lot of stuff, and so I was telling Patty that my husband, my husband works for Google, and so he's like a very early adapter of many new technologies. But things like all of our bills we've set up like automatic bill payment through Bank of America, and so I don't need to worry about paying the insurance bill or the whatever bill because that just happens. So taking some of those things that are that can be automated off of your plate, even reorganizing your inbox so that you don't get the 405 messages every single day, but your inbox can actually sort which ones are important, which ones are not. So using technology, I think, can be helpful. I know that that's not the answer for everyone, but that's definitely helped for me personally in managing, trying to keep the balls up in the air.
I think that for me, I would add personally, in the workplace, I have a lot of people who are better. Like I'm okay with the stuff I don't know how to do. Okay, I try to connect with people who are better at it than I am. But for day-to-day little things, for me, that could be really stressful is not being able to find my other shoe. And that could be because you get your whole outfit, now you can't find the other shoe. It's the worst thing. It can make you 15 minutes late. So find your shoes at night. So that's one thing that I would suggest. It sounds really small, but when you can't find the other shoe. So I think what you have to do is bite size and just take it in a practical sense. And it's okay, right, that everything's not in a file or all the red sweaters, I'm with the red sweaters and all the, that kind of thing. I think that you have to figure out what's going to make it easier for you, whatever that means. And I'm really fortunate, my daughter, her entire life, I think she's a gifted administrator. So I just maximized on that because she would always say, what's next? And so that was very helpful. I didn't feel like she was parentified. I felt like those were the gifts she had, and I shouldn't ignore them. And so I knew that she would help me be better, and I am because of her. So just kind of chill out.
Embrace.
Yes.
Embrace. I make my kids do their own laundry.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
I did that.
It was so freeing. I'm like, I'm so sick of inside-out socks, and I'm just, you do it.
Yeah.
So when they hit high school, they had to do their own laundry. I feel so much better. Let's talk about mom guilt a little bit. I know we touched on it, but talk about the benefits of seeing yourself as important and how that trickles down to the children. How do we teach the children about mom taking care of herself is good, mom relieving stress is good? How does that help the whole family when mom takes care of her stress? Anybody want to jump in on that?
Well, I think they feel it when you're stressed and when you're not stressed. So I think that's really important. With my daughter in particular, I have a son as well, but since we're talking about mom, she's not a mom at this point. But what I've tried to do, because my self-care has not been my strong suit, as probably is the case for many women, but I've tried to teach her, since she was very little, how to take care of herself. So it's about getting home, pajamas on within an hour, get a candle from somewhere, put your favorite song. And so we always would dance a lot, but really, really early in life, I started teaching her about self-care. So we would do it together, and like we're really geeked about cool house shoes and those kind of things. And then talk out loud about. I would say today is you guys are going somewhere with Dad. I don't really care where it is. And I'm gonna stay here and getting in the shower and putting pajamas on. I got all my favorite foods, and I'm watching SVU for as long as I want.
Katie?
I think I think it's really important to recognize that it's an expectation that we all have, that we be self-sufficient. So teaching our children to care for themselves, modeling that for them, is going to get them to that point. Doing everything for them and sacrificing ourselves is going to make them forever dependent. Mm-hmm. And that's just not part of the American view. We expect everybody to reach a point where they're self-sufficient. So we really need to recognize that sort of launching our children is a long process that starts very early on. Mm-hmm. I also think that it generates a great deal of pride. They are very proud of themselves when they can do things like tie their own shoes, do their own laundry, get their own breakfast, pack their own lunch. Those are all sources of pride and help them to see that they're capable. And those are all important lessons. And then I think they want to help us, and we should let them help us. We should say, you need to pick up your room, but I really need you to help me pick up your room. Mm-hmm. I really need you to help me put this puzzle back together. And I think that then they feel like they're part of us, part of the family. They see their place. And those are all critical lessons for them to have.
Mm-hmm. And, I was going to say, along those same lines, I think I talk to my kids about it, and you know what, I'm really kind of stressed out because I got to get this and that done. And I find that sometimes they'll be like, oh, Mommy, maybe I can do this for you. They'll offer to help. The other thing that we've started doing is, I heard that Michelle Obama did this, and I love Michelle Obama, so I was like, I would do that too. But we talk about roses, buds, and thorns at dinner or before bedtime. So the rose is one thing that was great today, the thorn is one thing that was hard today, and the bud is one thing you're looking forward to. And we all, my kids and my husband and I, all do it together. And I think it's meaningful for them to hear, like, you know what, I had a really hard day because this didn't go the way I wanted it to, or that made me really stressed out. And talking about it as a family normalizes it, gives them, I hope, some coping skills, and just sort of destigmatizes it too, because it's like, yep, we all feel stress and we can deal with it, and this is how I dealt with it, and what ideas did you guys have to deal with that, or what happened in your day that was hard? Let's talk about that. How might you have done something differently? So I think just sort of putting it out there and taking away the taboo of talking about it, and sort of that feeling that we have to manage it all and keep it all together and have this perfect facade. My kids know that that does not exist.
Just to add to that, I think my husband and I, our major role is to be role models. So we're our own people. We like to be together. We have our own lives. And when each of us go to work, we do something that is beneficial to this world. Mm-hmm. And when they grow up, I hope they look for partners who want to be their own selves and like being together. But they've got to invest in what they see. And if my husband and I don't create the people we should be, that's a disservice to my children. So being a working mom for me is what I need to do. It's what I love to do. And it's good for them to see that.
Yeah. Even when you're yelling.
Ouch.
I just can't, sometimes it just comes out. And I try to explain to them later, I'm sorry, I just was losing it at the moment. So you guys, we have so many great questions up here we're not going to get to. But there was one shout out from you guys. Shout out to the school community who supports free breakfast and lunch and school supplies and school services and dental care. So shout out to them from you guys. And a shout out to all the moms in the room. You're terrific moms. Keep up the good work. You're doing great. And so we have to wrap it up. So I know there's some questions, actually a pretty good stack of questions we didn't get to. I'm so sorry, but these guys are here. So if you have a really pressing question, make sure you ask. We can't leave without noting that Sue Ann Thompson is sitting right here in our presence. Sue Ann, thank you so much for all you do. I mean, really, none of this would be happening. We wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be getting this great information if you hadn't, all these years ago, gotten this going. So thank you so much. Thanks again to all of the panelists who were here. You guys were awesome, as we expected. To the sponsors who helped make this happen today, the partners, our wonderful attendees, thank you all. We want to encourage you to keep the conversation going. Help the moms who aren't here. Help the moms who are virtually joining us online. Look for ways to support each other every day. Build up, don't tear down. Support the information, share the resources. wwhf.org is the website. We've live streamed the website today, or I mean the event today, but it can also be, you can share it from the website there. In addition to sharing information about stress, the takeaway from today is the reminder to encourage each other, have compassion for other moms. Don't compare yourself to the perfect pictures on Facebook. They're not real. We truly are more alike than we are different. I told my kids, we were at the pumpkin patch a couple of years back, and we were looking at all the different pumpkins. You know, they have the gray ones, the bumpy ones, the warty ones. They're all orange on the inside, right? We're all just doing the best we can. We're very much more alike than we are different. Understanding can go a long way, friends. Again, thank you for attending today. You guys are all awesome. You muscled through the parking issues. We had a baby who didn't make a peep. My God, Mama, you're the best. If you haven't seen the exhibits outside, check them out. It's good for you. Take time for yourself. Do it. Even if it's 10 minutes in the line picking up your kids at school today, breathe 5 minutes. 5 minutes of breathing is little chunks, little chunks. Speak to us afterwards if you have pressing questions. We want to help you. And Godspeed, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for being here.
Are we on? Thank you.
Check, check, check.
Thank you.
You were
That was
awesome.
great.